Chapter 4. The road turned from gravel to packed dirt, then dissolved entirely into two worn ruts cut through palmetto and pine. Bodirt followed Cricket's panicked directions from memory, pushing the Ford past the point where GPS maps gave up and showed nothing but green. The coastal humidity burned off as he drove west, replaced by the sharp chemical bite of fertilizer baking in the sun. Out here, the Everglades agricultural area stretched in a massive flat grid of irrigation canals and sugarcane running straight to the horizon. He spotted the galvanized metal roofs gleaming through a break in the trees. The storage facility sat on a cleared acre, a cluster of rectangular buildings arranged in two long rows. The corrugated steel was baked orange with rust. A chain-link fence ringed the property, but the gate hung wide open, its hinges sagging under their own weight. A padlock dangled from the hasp, unfastened. Someone had been in a hurry, or they just didn't care who wandered in. Bodirt killed the engine. The Ford ticked and pinged as it cooled. Brown dust drifted over the hood in the dead still air. No wind. No birds. Just the oppressive weight of the August sun and the electric hum of cicadas in the brush. He stepped out, his boots crunching on the baked earth, and scanned the rows. It felt like a graveyard. Not for bodies, but for bad ideas and forgotten lives abandoned out here in the heat. Most of the roll-down doors were secured by rusted locks or nothing at all. Some bore faded names scrawled in Sharpie, most were blank. Bodirt walked down the second row, sweat already pooling at the small of his back, his eyes tracking the dirt for signs of life. Unit 14 was tucked at the very back, pressed right up against the perimeter fence. The first thing Bodirt noticed was the lock. A fresh brass master lock, gleaming against the oxidized metal of the door. The hasp had been replaced too, the screws shiny, untouched by the coastal salt air. The second thing he noticed was the ground. Tire tracks. Passenger tread, cutting a sharp turn in the loose dirt right in front of the unit. They pulled up, sat for a while, and reversed out. The impressions were crisp. They'd been made last night, or maybe just a few hours ago. Bodirt pulled his multi-tool from his pocket and folded out the flathead driver. He'd popped 105-pin master locks back when he carried a sheriff's star and had probable cause backing his play. Now he just had a missing girl and a ticking clock. He slid the driver into the keyway, applying tension, feeling for the pins to bind. He gave it 20 seconds of patient, deliberate pressure, ignoring the sweat stinging his eyes. The shackle snapped open, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. He slipped the brass lock free, set it gently on the dirt, and grabbed the door handle. It was heavy. The springs were old and rusted, fighting him all the way up, groaning in protest until the latch clicked into place overhead. The air that rolled out hit him like a physical blow. It was freezing. A heavy, artificial chill that immediately turned the sweat on his arms clammy. He stepped over the threshold, pulling the door back down slightly to hide the gap. The unit had active power, and a heavy-duty AC unit hummed in the dark, keeping the space at a temperature that defied the Florida summer outside. Bare corrugated walls. 20 feet deep, 10 feet wide. A single chair sat dead center, high-backed, upholstered in dark red velvet. It looked like a prop stolen from an old parlor. Above it hung a motionless disco ball, its mirrored facets catching the flat, merciless glare of a long-life bulb mounted on the ceiling. Then, Bodirt turned his attention to the far wall. It was covered in photographs. Polaroids, the instant kind with thick white borders, yellowing slightly at the edges. 9 of them, arranged in a precise grid against the metal. Bodirt stepped closer, the cold biting through his thin shirt. 9 young women. All with brown hair. All with wide eyes and shy, trusting smiles. The faces were different, but the essence was identical. They were girls who hadn't yet figured out that a smile could be a trap. Dates were written beneath each picture in neat, meticulous black marker. Bodirt traced the timeline with his eyes. The oldest was 2 years ago. The gaps between the dates shrank as he moved across the grid. 4 months. Then 3. Then 2. Then a matter of weeks. The pattern was accelerating. The most recent photo sat dead center. Chloe Wembley. The same school picture her mother had handed him on the steps of the Airstream, her freckles dark against the glossy film. The date beneath her face was 3 days old. The day she vanished. To the right of the photo collage, a small metal shelf held a glass display case. It was the kind jewelers used to present high-end watches, lined with black velvet. Inside rested a row of cufflinks. 7 of them. Silver gold, mother-of-pearl onyx. Each one unique, polished to a mirror shine. Bodirt counted the slots. 8 indentations in the velvet. The 8th slot was empty. He stood perfectly still in the freezing air. He didn't touch the glass, didn't touch the photos. He let his detective instincts catalog the grim math of the scene. 9 girls on the wall. 7 cufflinks in the case. 1 empty slot waiting to be filled. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the cheap, disposable camera he'd bought at a CVS on Federal Highway. He framed the shot. The flash popped, a blinding burst of white in the dim unit, freezing the collage. He wound the film, stepping sideways. Another flash for the dates. Another for the velvet case. Another for the empty chair. He shot the entire roll. The mechanical click and whine of the camera the only sound besides the humming AC. When the dial stopped turning, Bodirt shoved the camera back into his pocket. He took one last look at the 9 faces staring back at him. Somewhere out there, the man who owned this lock was polishing that 8th cufflink. Bodirt ducked under the door, heaved it back down until the latch engaged, and snapped the brass padlock back into place. The metal was already warming up in the sun. The cold air seeping from the seams mixed with the blistering heat of the lot, swirling around his boots in a thin fog. He walked back to the Ford, his stride longer, harder. He climbed behind the wheel, ignoring the stifling heat trapped in the cab. The camera pressed against his ribs like a rock. The gaps were closing. The pattern was tightening into a noose. 3 days since Chloe disappeared. The clock was running out faster than he'd thought. Bodirt slammed the truck into gear, the transmission grinding in protest, and tore out of the facility, leaving a plume of brown dust in his wake. He had a suspect, a pattern, and a pocket full of photographic evidence. Now he just needed to find a cop desperate enough to use it.